Danny Price Fixer was wandering around in the dark with Lady Velcour and Clark Kent, feeling absolutely wonderful, when Miss Portinari intercepted him.
"This will interest you,"
she said, handing him an envelope similar to the one she had handed Fish and Chips.
"What is it?"
he asked, seeing her as a Greek woman in classic robes holding a golden apple.
"Take a look."
He opened the envelope and found a picture of Tobias Knight and Zev Hirsch in the middle of the confrontation office, setting the timer on the bomb.
"This man,"
she said, pointing to Knight,
"is willing to turn state's evidence against both Hirsch and Atlanta Hope. You've wanted to nab them for a long time, haven't you?"
"Who are you?"
Danny asked, staring.
"I am the one Mama Sutra told you of, the one appointed to contact you here in Ingolstadt. I am of the Illuminated."
"What are those two talking about?"
Clark Kent asked Lady Velcour.
"Who knows?"
she shrugged.
"They're both tripping." "God's Lightning is the most active front in America today for the cult of the Yellow Sign,"
Miss Portinari went on, telling the Mark the tale. A few feet away, Joe Malik said to Hagbard,
"I don't like frame-ups, even for people like Hirsch and Hope."
"You suspect us of unethical behavior?"
Hagbard asked innocently. Pat Walsh is dialing a phone.
"I don't believe in jails,"
Joe said bluntly.
"I don't think Atlanta and Zev will be any better when they get out. They'll be worse."
"You can be sure the Illuminati will protect you,"
Miss Portinari concluded gravely. Danny Price Fixer continued to stare at her.
"The phone is ringing far away, dragging me back to a body, a self, a purpose, shattering my memories of being the ringmaster. I sit up and lift the receiver. 'Hirsch,' I say.
"My name is Pat Walsh,"
A woman's voice says.
"I speak for Atlanta herself. The password is the Lime."
"Go ahead," I say hoarsely, wondering if it's about that peacenik professor we killed at UN Plaza on April 1st.
"You're being framed for a bombing,"
she said.
"You have to go into hiding."
Hagbard laughed.
"Atlanta isn't returning to the States. She's been a double agent for over 2 years, working for me."
I found the warehouse door the Walsh woman described. It was open, as she had promised, and I wondered about the name on it, Gold and Appel Transfers.
"So is Tobias Knight, and he'll cop a plea. It's all been carefully planned, Joe. You only thought bombing your own office was your idea."
"How about Zev Hirsch?"
Joe asked.
"He's having some very educational experiences about this time in New York City."
Hagbard replied.
"I don't believe in jails either."
And I am trapped. The three of them surround me, and Jubella demands, "Tell us the word." Jubello repeats, "Tell us the word." And Jubellum unsheaths the sword. "Tell us the word, Zev Hirsch."
"A bombing in New York?"
the president asked shrewdly, trying to look as tough as his predecessor.
"Yes,"
Saul went on.
"As soon as the link with God's Lightning was clear to us, Bonnie and I took off for Las Vegas. Well, you can understand why."
The president didn't understand any of this, but wasn't about to admit that.
"Are you headed for Las Vegas?"
he asked shrewdly, trying to look as tough as his predecessor.
"Yes,"
Saul said sincerely.
"As soon as we found out about anthrax, leprosy, pie, and Dr. Mocenigo's death, we realized the same organization must be implicated. God's Lightning—"
"God's Lightning?"
the president asked shrewdly, remembering earlier years when he had been a guest speaker at their rallies.
"And the secret group that has infiltrated them and taken them over, the Cult of the Yellow Sign. We have reason to believe that an English intelligence agent named Chips will be arriving in London in a few hours, with evidence against most of the Yellow Sign operatives within their government. You see, sir, this is an international conspiracy."
"An international conspiracy?"
the president asked shrewdly. And in Central Park, our old friend Perry hops from tree to ground, snatches a nut thrown by August Personage, and quickly runs around the tree 3 times in case this friend, possibly enemy, produces a gun and starts blasting.
While far above the highest mountains in California, another aspect of my consciousness soars like winged poetry, and knows, somehow, more about what is coming than Dr. Troll's seismograph, for I am the last, truly the last. The ecologists are right. Mine is not merely an endangered, but nearly an extinct species, and my senses have been sharpened beyond instinct by these last years. I circle around, I circle around, I soar, I bank, I float. I am, rare moment for me, not thinking about fish, for my belly is full at present. I circle around, thinking only about the soaring, the freedom, and more vaguely about the bad vibes coming up from below. Must you have a name? Call me Holly One, then. Hollyitis Leucocephalus the Last. Symbol once of Imperial Rome and now of Imperial America, of which I neither know nor care, for all I know is the freedom of my estate, and about that the Romans and the Americans have never had aught but the most confused and distorted ideas. Wearing my long green feathers, I circle around. I am Holly One, and I scream, not with rage or with fear or with anger. I scream with ecstasy, the terrible joy of my very existence, and the scream echoes from mountain to another mountain, resonating onward and onward, a sound that only another of my species could understand, and none are left to hear it. But still I scream. The shriek of Shiva the Destroyer, true face of Vishnu the Preserver, and Brahma the Creator, for my scream is not of life or death, but of life in death. And I am equally contemptuous of Perry, and of august personage, of squirrels, and of men, and of all lesser birds, who cannot ascend to my height, and know the agony and supremacy of my freedom.
Hagbard's mouth fell open in completely genuine surprise.
Well, sink me,
he said, beginning to laugh.
We both pass.
Hagbard went on happily.
We've been judged and found innocent by the great god Acid.
Joe took a deep breath.
And when do you start to explain in monosyllables or sign language or semaphore or something a non-illuminated moron like me can understand?
You read all the clues. It was right out in the open. It was plain as a barn door. It was as conspicuous as my nose and twice as homely in every sense of that word.
Hagbard, for Christ's sake, and for my sake and for all our sakes, will you stop gloating and give me the answer?
I'm sorry.
Hagbard pocketed the gun carelessly.
I'm a bit giddy. I've been waging a kind of war all night, high on acid. It was a strain, especially since I was at least 90% sure you'd kill me before it was over.
He lit one of his abominable cigars.
Briefly, then, the Illuminati is benevolent, compassionate, kindly, generous, etc., etc., and all the other complimentary adjectives you can think of. In short, we're the good guys.
But it can't be.
It can be, and it is.
Hagbard motioned him toward the Bugatti.
Let's sit down, if I may permit myself one more acrostic before the codes and puzzles are all resolved.
They climbed into the front seat, and Joe accepted the brandy decanter Hagbard offered.
Of course,
Hagbard went on,
when I say good, you've got to understand that all terms are relative. We're as good as is possible in this fucked-up section of the galaxy. We're not perfect. Certainly I'm not, and I haven't observed anything approaching immaculate perfection in any of the other masters of the temple either. But we are, in human terms and by ordinary standards, decent chaps. There's a reason for that. It's the basic law of magic, and it's in every textbook. You must have read it somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Joe took a stiff snort of the brandy. It was peach, his favorite.
Yes, I think. As ye give, so shall ye get.
Precisely.
Hagbard took back the bottle and had a snort himself.
Mind you, Joe, that's a scientific law, not a moral commandment. There are no commandments because there is no commander anywhere. All authority is a delusion, whether in theology or in sociology. Everything is radically, even sickeningly, free. The first law of magic is as neutral as Newton's first law of motion. It says that the equation balances, and that's all it says. You are still free to give evil and pain if you decide you must. Once done, however, you never escape the consequences. It always comes back. No prayers, sacrifices, mortifications, or supplications will change it any more than they'll change Newton's laws or Einstein's. So we're good, as moralists would say, because we know enough to have a bloody strong reason to be good. In the last week, things went too fast and I became evil. I deliberately ordered and paid for the deaths of various people and set in motion processes that have led to still other deaths. I knew what I was doing, and I knew, and still know, that I'll pay for it. Such decisions are extremely rare in the history of the Order, and my superior, the Dalai Lama, tried to persuade me it was unnecessary this time, too. I disagreed. I take the responsibility. No man or god or goddess can change it. I will pay, and I'm ready to pay whenever and however the bill is presented.
Hagbard, what are you?
A Mehum, the Sour family would say.
Hagbard grinned.
A mere human, no more, not one jot more.
There were 5 of us.
John Dillinger was explaining to George as they trudged back toward Ingolstadt, having lost Hagbard and the Bugatti in the crowd.
My folks kept it a secret. German people, very superstitious and secretive. They didn't want reporters all over the place and headlines about the first quintuplets to live. The Dion family got all that much later. John Herbert Dillinger is in Las Vegas trying to track down the plague, unless he's already finished up and went home to Los Angeles.
John smiled.
He was always the brains of the bunch, runs a rock music company, real professional businessman. He was the oldest, by a couple of minutes, and we all sort of look up to him. He served the prison time, even though I'm the one who rightly should have, seen that robbing that grocer was my dumb idea. But he said he could take it without cracking up. And he was right. John Hoover Dillinger lives in Mad Dog under the name D.J. Hoover. He's not above letting people suspect he's a distant relative of J. Edgar's. Mostly,
John said,
he's retired, except occasionally for little jobs like helping arrange convincing jailbreaks, say, when Jim Cartwright wants to let a prisoner get out in a realistic fashion. Gave Naismith the idea for the John Dillinger Died for You Society.
How about the other 2?
George asked, thinking that it would be even harder to decide whether he loved Stella more than Mavis, or Mavis more than Stella, now that he knew they were the same person. He wondered how Joe felt, since he obviously dug Miss Mao Sushi, and she was that person also. 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, like Dillinger. Or was Dillinger 5 in 3? George realized suddenly that he was still tripping a little. Dillinger was 5 in 1, not 5 in 3. The law of 5s again. Did that mean there were 2 more in the Mavis-Stella-Mao complex? 2 that he hadn't met yet? Why did 2 and 3 keep popping up in all this?
The other 2 are dead,
John said sadly.
John Edgar Dillinger was born first, and he went and died first. Fast and furious he was. It was him that plugged that bank guard in East Chicago while the rest of us were vacationing and laying low in Miami. Always the hothead he was. Had a heart attack back in '43 and went to an early grave. John Thomas Dillinger went in '69. He was in Chicago in '68 on a jam assignment, meeting with a crazy English spy named Chips. British intelligence somehow got a report that the Democratic Convention was being run by the Bavarian Illuminati and would end with an assassination. They didn't believe in the Illuminati, so they sent Chips. They always send him on wild cases because he's nutty enough to take them seriously and do a thorough job. Both of them got tear gas coming out of the Hilton Hotel, and poor Chips got thrown in a paddy wagon with a bunch of young radicals. John Thomas had a chest problem already, a chronic asthma, and the tear gas made it a lot worse. He went from doctor to doctor and finally passed away in early '69. So there's a cop in Chicago who could boast that he really killed John Dillinger, only he doesn't know it. Isn't life peculiar?
The Sauer family only thought they were in the Illuminati.
Hagbard went on.
Hitler and Stalin only thought they were in the Illuminati. Old Weishaupt only thought he was in the Illuminati. It's that simple. The moral of the whole story is...
I think it's beginning to penetrate,
Joe said slowly.
It was, of course, the very first hypothesis I formed. There have been many groups in history who called themselves the Illuminati, and they weren't all aiming at exactly the same thing.
Precisely.
Hagbard puffed again at his cigar.
That's the natural first suspicion of any non-paranoid mind. Then, as you explore the evidence, links between these groups begin to appear. Eventually, the paranoid hypothesis begins to appear more plausible, and you begin to believe there always has been one Illuminati, using the same basic slogans and symbols and aiming at the same basic goal. I sent Jim Cartwright to you with that yarn about 3 conspiracies, the ABC, or Ancient Bavarian Conspiracy, the NBC, or New Bavarian Conspiracy, and the CBS, or Conservative Bavarian Seers, to set you thinking that the truth might be midway backward toward the simple first idea. From here on in, forget that I represent the original Illuminati. In fact, in recent centuries, we don't use a name at all. We employ only the initials AA, written like this.
He sketched on a Donau Hotel matchbook. A.
A lot of occult writers,
he went on,
have made some amazing guesses as to what that means. Actually, it doesn't mean a damn thing. To prevent our name from being stolen and misused again, we don't have a name. Anybody who thinks he's guessed the name and tries to pass himself off as an initiate by declaring that we're really the Atlantean Arcanum or the Argentium Astrum or whatever immediately reveals that he's a fraud. It's a neat gimmick. I only wish we'd thought of it centuries earlier.